The University of Cape Town's revised language policy has categorized English, Afrikaans and isiXhosa as official languages of the university, but the policy also identifies Khoe, New and Afrikaans as languages for development. These developments bring the efforts for the recognition of the First Nations, their descendants and their languages to the fore. For more on this, we're joined by Anthony Philip Williams of Indigenous First Nation Advocacy South Africa. Very good evening to you, Anthony. Thank you for your time. I mean, with the fight for recognition and consideration of the First Nations, we know that it's no secret. South African Sign Language was officially recognized before those of the First Nations. Does its development and accommodation in academia and media have something to do with that?
Well, I think so, yes, absolutely, because I personally know Professor Lolly, who's been the former chairperson of the Pan South African Language Board, and I know that they've been tirelessly working behind the scenes to advance sign language. And you also know that she is a professor at UCT, and so UCT played an important role of driving that agenda of ensuring that sign language became official. And this is a discussion I had with her. And so hopefully the same energy that a person like her and UCT influenced on that process, that the same energy will be used to get the Khoe and the new language, amongst others, as official languages for the Indigenous First Nation.
How significant are these developments as we, talk about the history and preservation of culture and language?
So many people don't understand the importance of the crisis that we are in as a country. This country has decided to co-opt the Indigenous First Nation language in the coat of arms, but has subsequently decided that they are not going to give official recognition to a language that is in the coat of arms. It is also important that people understand that this group of people who are currently classified as colored people in this country also has been divorced from their language so many years ago. And there's been a cultural genocide that has been meted against our people, and nobody's talking about that. And language is absolutely critical if you are going to talk about a recognition of a people. And in this case, the Traditional Khoisan Leadership Act is hoping to recognize us, but it cannot recognize us outside of our language, outside of the land which we have occupied before people settled on the land. So it's critical that we utilize the language right now to force government to recognize the people and the land and their economy.
You make reference to a cultural genocide, so to speak. If you had to measure the impacts, how would you assess it?
If I have to measure what?
The impact of what you refer to as a cultural genocide, how would you reflect it?
Well, one of the big mistakes that South Africa has made, when we ventured into what is called democracy, we have never had the opportunity to sit down as a nation collective. And I always speak about the African people collective. Now, when we talk about African people, the African people is normally, we normally exclude the San and the Khoe people out of the entire discussion around the African identity. But it cannot be correct because you can't have people in Africa outside of the Bushmen and the Khoe people, because we know that scientifically and scientists has located the Bushmen and Khoe people as first people within Africa, as the first Homo sapiens. So it's important that we first go back, we take a couple of steps back, we first recognize this group of people, we recognize who they are, we recognize their language, and we recognize their land rights and their rights inland. Until you have that recognition, you have a recognition in the identity and the language and the land. What are we talking about? We're looking at South Africa as disintegrating. South Africa is falling apart. Why is South Africa falling apart? We have built South Africa on lies. We have not built South Africa on the foundation nation of this land. And for that reason, our ancestors keep on knocking on the door for the sanity of this government and this people. Until you have that, you're going to have chaos and you will not have peace in this land.
Could the development of the languages in the academia space help with preservation and perhaps help the youth recognize their value and utility?
It's important that academia plays a role. When we had the privilege of getting UCT to recognize Dr. Katrina Iso, the only speaker of the Ngu language across the world, across the entire world. One of the things that we have asked UCT is that UCT must play a more active role in taking our hand and in helping us to restore this people and to restore their language. Because if we don't take this language serious, and if we don't begin to embrace this language, our young people, our children are just simply falling apart. You look at the townships, you look at the Cape Flats, it is indicative of a people who is powerless, a people whose identity has been usurped, as a people who have lost everything. And until you begin to deal with the issues of identity, because identity also helps us with our language and finding our language, it will ultimately help us find the peace that our young people so desperately is looking for. There's a big disjuncture between who the young people are and who their ancestors are. They don't understand that gap, and then therefore academia must play a more active role. We are currently in discussions with Wits University also on this side to equally come to the table, to sit around the table so that we can restore the identity, the language, and that which is critical for our community. And academia must play a more active role in restoring the Indigenous First People.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for weighing in on this conversation and speaking to us this evening. Wrapping up that discussion, Anthony Philip Williams of Indigenous First Nation Advocacy, South Africa.